Growing up with Nanci always being in my life, she was close friends with my older brothers. So it wasn't until we actually got married and had our own kids that as couples we became very close. And we went through some really difficult things together. Her cancer, obviously. And then when my wife, Michelle, died on New Year's Day unexpectedly, Randy and Nanci were just rocks for me. Both of them were just always there. And even though Nanci was limited in her contact, she still just reached out to me all the time. In fact, probably the most meaningful connection I ever had with her was the very last time I got to be with her when she could still communicate. It was 3 days before she died. When she realized that I was standing next to her bed, she could barely talk and she could barely open her eyes at all. But when she knew that it was me, she lifted up her head and looked right at me. And she opened her eyes and she said, "How are you doing?" And I just thought, here you are on your deathbed and you're caring about how I'm feeling. That was Nanci. She cared about her relationship with Christ so much that it just spilled over into her other relationships. If you heard some of the things that she wrote in her diaries that Randy read to us, so powerful. And I just think, when things get really tough, when the rubber meets the road in your faith, that's where you can tell how close you are to the Lord. And man, she was just right there with him. So she was a friend that would always, you could always depend on for her walk with Christ, knowing that she never wavered all the way until the very end. She never wavered. Well, we got the privilege of always being able to get together about once a week. There were times when we, as couples, were just going through difficult things, even here at church when we had rough things. Nanci was always one to give really godly wisdom. She would always bring you back to the Lord. I don't think she ever got sidetracked from that. And so that was what was really helpful for Michelle and me because, when you're in things, sometimes you lose perspective. And she was always able to just kind of bring it right back to the Lord and kind of put a context to what's going on. Okay, you might be going through this really hard thing, but God's got this. And she did that with her own life too. She was a great example all the way to the very end. Nanci was just that perfect balance of being her own person and separate from Randy in her walk with Christ, but also being one flesh with him. The two of them were just the perfect pair, They were so complementary towards each other in their giftings. And it was really wonderful to see